There are varying questions, Diana, around how we can get more pastors to do what Reverend Buddy did, to speak truth to power the way she did, to have that courage. Any offerings of advice?
Yes, actually, on the couple days after the election, I went to my own pastor and I said to her, I think it's really important women pastors, especially women of color who pastor, really need some extra protection. I just asked her kind of what was going on. She gave a kind of a half-hearted sermon that first Sunday, and I wanted to know why, because she's usually a very brave preacher. And so she said, oh, I just didn't know what to say. And, she was feeling the weight of it. She was worried about the people who might have voted for Trump in our congregation, which wouldn't have been very many, but nevertheless, they're there. And so I said, one of the things I want to do, I'm not super wealthy, but I have some resources. And if anybody comes to you and tells you to not preach something, or they're going to take their money away from the church, you come to me and I will make up the pledge. And she said, "Oh my gosh, nobody's ever said anything like that to me." And I'm not sure if you all can think about that, but if you have any kind of resources and can back a brave pastor, do that and make sure they know you're going to do that. And so then, I sent in a much bigger pledge check at the end of the year to prove that I was going to put my money where my mouth was. And that's one thing that lay people can really do, because what happens is the people who get angry at sermons like Mariann Budde's sermon, they're going to be the first people there and they're going to be threatening. So what that pastor needs is that pastor needs to know that there are all the other people there who will stand up with and for them. So I think that's an incredibly beautiful, practical thing that so many pastors, they just need to know that you're with them, you're behind them, and that when stuff hits, they're not going to be alone. And that you're going to make sure they don't lose their job and make sure that they are safe. And the only way that that happens is if the congregation rallies. So that's my main suggestion, is not to pastors. There are so many brave pastors and pastors who I think are getting braver, or at least want to be braver, but they can't do it by themselves and they need their congregations. So if you're in a congregation, make sure that pastor knows you got his or her back and you are not going to let threats take them down.
The simple suggestions are often the most profound, right? Like it's just right there. And I don't think I've heard anyone articulate that. So thank you, Diana. Robbie, there was another question about like what organizations can we support? Whether that's around policy or, Christian or faith communities, or do you have any sense of how folks might truly support folks who are doing this work?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about this too along these lines. People who are white and Christian, if we're not uncomfortable leveling it right, if you have a financial advisor and they're not sending you emails of concern about the level of money you're wanting to give away, I think you're not doing it right. So I think that's just the time we're in, right? And so I think there's of course some like national organizations, but there are local organizations that don't get the kind of grant support money that national organizations are often able to get. So I think looking at those local organizations that are looking out, so just who's being targeted and who's looking out for those folks, right? In the local community, because those people, $10,000 to those groups is a lot of money. right? And may make a difference, right? In what they can actually do at the local level. So I think, any groups that are working in immigrants, refugees, LGBTQ people, transgender people, like all the groups that are just being overtly targeted in this first wave of things, I think that is like ought to be front and center. It doesn't take that long to kind of do a quick Google in your local community, talk to people who you know, ask your local pastors, who those groups are, and make the investment and make it early. Don't wait till to December. Right when most of us, I'm guilty of this too. Start thinking, oh wait, the deadline's up. I got to like think about like making sure I've made all my charitable donations, but making it earlier in the year. So even if you're capable of doing it, even if you just gave in December, thinking about giving again first quarter, and then have it be a first quarter thing, particularly in this given year. But I really do think, we're trying to live this out in our family as well, like like doubling what we usually do this year, because that's the kind of year it is.
Robbie, that is so important because one of the things, if you think about the all these orders that are related to Project 2025 that have come out, this is part of 4 years of specifically planning for this moment that they didn't even know was going to happen. They just said, well, let's plan on winning, and this is the plan we're going to do. So already, those of us who find this to be just horrible, which it is, we're 4 years behind. And somebody said that to me today. Well, we're already 4 years behind them. And I said, yeah, 4 years and about $30 billion because Elon Musk is sitting right next to Donald Trump and just throwing money at everything he wants to do. And that's the other piece. We're behind in our time schedule and we have to catch up. So there's a level of urgency here, but we're also behind in cash. And to hear you make that plea, I mean, that's what we're thinking about in our family too. And I just made that pretty clear. I can't really afford two pledges in my church, but I will do what I can to fill that gap up. And then also, I'm looking around and I'm looking at organizations very specifically. And we talked to our financial people um, just a couple weeks ago about this very thing. How can we give more? And where do we want to put it? And we want to be very strategic about this as well. So we all have to free up money. That those of us who can, there are people who can't, and the people who can't, please do not feel left out of this conversation because we also need your prayers, your emotional support, your loud voice, everything else
Time.
that
Yeah.
you can give. But people who have money, let's act like prosperity gospel types here. If you throw it,
Plant
cast it
the
on the
seed, man.
cast it on the waters and it's going to come back to you. Let's believe that. We cast our cash out there and maybe we'll provide safety and a bit more freedom and maybe restore some level of sanity to our democratic process if we are willing to invest in it.
Y'all, I like where we sort of ended up in this conversation. We've got a lot of heavy stuff to deal with, but there was a robust conversation about how to respond proactively with intention and strategy. And so, I'm kind of leaving with a sense of, all right, things suck right now, but also we have agency and we can take some actions here. And that's the spirit I want us to continue in. One of the things that I think is just we're just going to have to get used to, and certain other his people groups historically have done this for a long time. You got to have the grief walking right alongside the action. And we can't wait for the grief to be over to take action and all of those things. We're just going to have to hold a lot of complex emotions and realities all at the same time.